This Fireside chart is focused on youth and sustainability. As we know, globally, youths are playing a significant role in policy making. We have seen in the last couple of years that is increasing a lot. And fast forward, these youths who are today, they will be the future. They will see 2050. Globally, there are a lot of commitments around 2050, the Paris Agreement goals. But today's youth will face that, and today's youth, they'll be the key driver for the future. This is a program where we will see the voices of youths, and this will be invited by this will be moderated by Ms. Shalini Singh, Head Corporate Communication and Sustainability at Holcim India. I invite Shalini Singh to this program, and Shalini is a foremost champion of sustainability in India. She's working for a long time. Joining her on the chart is Anant Singhal, founder Youth Policy Collective. And then Shalini and Anant will be joined by Ms. Istaara Amjad, Chair of the Environment and Sustainability Committee, Youth Policy Collective. Shalini, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Panigri, and a very, very good evening to everyone. I would like to welcome all of you to this fireside chat with two very, very special guests that we have today. We all know that today's youth play a very special role in climate action, and forums like these must give them a voice. So today we are very happy to discuss the role of youth in driving sustainability and sustainable businesses with our two brilliant and young panelists. Before we begin our discussion, both of our panelists belong to this very incredible organization, Youth Policy Collective, which is doing a fantastic work in the area of climate action. Commonly known as YPC, it is India's first youth-led think tank. Very, very proud to be really anchoring this particular forum with them. Our first panelist is Anant Singhal, who is also the founding member and a high school junior at the American School of Bombay. And like I mentioned before, the co-founder of YPC, India's first youth-led think tank. But that's not all. As a MUN enthusiast, he's passionate about international relations and economics. He's previously worked with the Quality Council of India and Niti Aayog on a very special platform called Unnati, which is a cutting-edge labor portal for blue and grey workers. Istaara Amjad, our second panelist, is an 11th grader from Islamabad. She's the chair of YPC's Environment and Sustainability Council. Istaara also works as a project manager for Share, a welfare organization with offices in two cities in Pakistan. So we do have a global voice today among us here. She's also represented Pakistan at the South Asian Youth Exchange Forum, and where she was the best delegate. So maybe we'll get a chance to hear a little bit about that. Both our panelists are currently working with over a dozen NGOs, corporations, including Niti Aayog, Teach for India, the Bindu Project, and the list goes on and on and on. So guys, this is too much work that you all are doing as teenagers. Very little left for us to really go forward. So Anant, I'm going to now deep dive into this panel discussion and ask you that YPC, as we know, is a one-year-old organization. And as a founder member, tell us how this idea came up, and what does YPC, what role it plays in the climate action today?
Sure. So during the first lockdown, schools across the nation had closed down, and while I was lucky enough to have virtual education opportunities, the vast majority of school children did not. So the idea of YPC really started during an intense Zoom discussion with my friends and future co-founders about this topic. So after hours of brainstorming, our arguments and deliberations eventually found common ground, and we developed shared convictions. But what then? How could we take that forward? How could we take our ideas forward? The unfortunate reality for us is that it was impossible to get our voice heard in the places where it matters. As the youth, our access to decision making is very limited. Even if we are the primary stakeholders on a particular issue. My co-founders and I decided that this needed to change, and we began conceptualizing YPC as a platform for youth engagement in policymaking through research and advocacy. Today, YPC has about 120 members across more than 40 schools in 8 countries, and we work across 6 different policy areas. So yeah, one of these policy areas. Thank you. One of these policy areas is environment and sustainability. And our Environment and Sustainability Committee conducts research and advocacy campaigns for a broad range of topics under the umbrella of sustainability. So as you mentioned, we partner with NGOs, companies, government agencies, and so far we've worked with Tata Power, Niti Aayog, and KPMG specifically for environment. We've worked on projects including legal personhood frameworks for the environment, urban waste management, and green job creation, as well as a practicum on the conservation of the Golden Mahasir with Tata Power. We also held the Ypc Climate Summit in October 2021. So as India's first ever youth-led conference on climate change, it was a path-changing event, bringing together more than 200 students, policymakers, and professionals to help solve the climate change crisis. Over the course of the summit, students from across the subcontinent engaged with distinguished members of the government, best-selling authors, and pioneers of industry who are leading the charge against climate change. Some of these include the Honorable Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance and Civil Aviation, Member of Parliament Shri Jayant Sinha, Dr. Praveer Sinha, CEO and MD of Tata Power, Ms. Mridula Ramesh, author of The Climate Solution, Mr. Shalabh Tandon, Regional Head of Operations and Climate Business of the International Finance Corporation, and Mr. G.V. Ravishankar, Managing Director of Sequoia Capital in India. And of course, we were also very happy to host Dr. K. Rajeshwar Rao, Special Secretary of the Niti Aayog.
That's wonderful. So, just to talk about the summit that you hosted, what were the key takeaways of that summit? And then I'll come to the COP26, your perspective on your takeaways and perspective. But what were the key takeaways from that particular conference that you held?
Right. So first, the objective of that conference was really to brainstorm different sustainability initiatives that we can undertake and sustainability programs that we can implement. I think the biggest thing, as mentioned in the panel before us, is the importance of implementing carbon credit systems and carbon tax systems. I think whenever we think of sustainability, carbon emissions are kind of at the forefront, and they play a massive role in driving global warming and climate change. So I think definitely reducing carbon emissions through these financial incentives and economic incentives is a primary takeaway from that from our YPC Climate Summit. The other takeaway is the importance of engaging a variety of different different stakeholders, whether it be the youth, companies, NGOs, and especially MSMEs. I think we have to create those shared platforms to allow shared knowledge and allow collaboration on sustainability projects, because that's really the way forward. And I think finally, it's another big key takeaway was the importance of engaging the youth. And we see a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of willingness amongst people our age to take climate action, right? And I think that we need to create more opportunities to take advantage of that, to leverage all of this passion to create on the ground change.
Right. And let me quickly ask you, what are your takeaways? Because I'm asking a youth takeaway from COP26. What do you guys think? And eager to hear your views. So,
oh, sorry, my bad. First, I think it's great to see that the international community is willing to work together on the issue and take collective action. From an Indian context, I think the conference really highlighted the importance of driving climate action through sustainable business. Businesses, especially MSMEs, need to adopt more sustainable practices to reduce their carbon emissions and work more closely with their communities on the ground level to minimize their environmental impact and preserve the natural resources around them. Sustainable businesses really will be the key driver towards reaching India's COP26 goals. And as I mentioned earlier, we need to make it as easy as possible for MSMEs to make that switch by providing them, with the support in terms of technological resources, with government support, and even as the youth, as through volunteering and through direct engagement with MSMEs.
Yeah, that I think that's a very, very important point that you made. And coming to Istaara, what role do you foresee for more youth engagement and climate action in the subcontinent, in the Indian subcontinent and the neighboring countries? What has been your experience? Do you see the same rigor, the same energy that we see today here in India? What's your view?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of ways, and like on every single level, we already have a lot of youth engagement, and I think that there's a lot of room for a lot more as well. But the potential is definitely there. So, firstly, I'd want to talk about just like on the ground, grassroots level projects and groups. So, we have a lot of welfare projects entirely come up with, the idea is come up with, and then the entire action is taken by youth, just like students coming from schools and taking this kind of action. And the kind of share, which is an organization that I'm in right now as well, it's entirely like a student run. So we think that I think that when you start from a small scale, maybe go to one park and pick up waste management there, go to one hiking trail. That sort of leads the way to a larger discussion in our own schools, but also on a national level, because we see the youth taking this as one of the primary priorities, along with everything else that we're doing. We're saying that this is something that we need to do, both us and the adults around us. And I think that there's a lot of room for when this is taken up by, the formal players in the industry, then there's a lot of room for mobilization of the youth who are already growing up and wanting to be part of this. At the same time, I think that events like the Climate Summit that Anant mentioned that we held last month, it sort of shows the need for discourse. And I think that there's a lot of willingness for constructive dialogue, and there's a need for this to take place between the youth and like players in the industry, maybe experts who are already working on this, maybe business people who are already in the economic sphere. And I think the kind of perspective we can provide is, yes, a lot of new ideas, but also we have the unique perspective of bringing this very much needed urgency to the situation, because climate catastrophe has been the reality that we've grown up in, right? It's not something new that we're caring about. So maybe the COP26 happened on the largest scale ever, but we've been growing up, and every single year since our childhood, we've heard about wildfires. We've heard about, look, another species is endangered, another species is extinct. We've heard about floods and droughts happening. And lastly, I think that there's a lot of room for the creation of green jobs, because I think that unemployment is a huge issue in general, but specifically for the youth as well. Because with the economy already in crisis and climate disaster just adding on to that burden, the youth are specifically like inconvenienced and sort of burdened by this pressure. And I think that when you have the economy shifting towards green places, even like in places like waste management, turning the informal economy into something with stable professions, that is something that can lead to a lot of stability and help for the youth.
So yeah, a valid point, and I think both of you mentioned the opportunity. So I would like to talk a little bit more about what, and Anant, this question is first to you. What do you see? What is the kind of movement you're seeing of young people in driving sustainable businesses in India? Because you talked about SME, and MSMEs, but do you see that a lot of young people are actually thinking that as an opportunity to get into climate science?
Sure. So I definitely agree with what Istaara said about the youth being much more exposed to climate issues, and I think that has driven a lot more interest and passion from Gen Z in joining that field. As I mentioned earlier, I think the youth can be a great asset for businesses, particularly in terms of their corporate social responsibility programs. There's a lot of potential for youth to be on the ground change makers and interfaces between local communities and businesses. So again, I would implore businesses to create opportunities for direct youth engagement within their own processes and partner with NGOs or youth organizations who can make that not just possible but efficient. And there are definitely a lot of youth looking at specializing in the climate space. I really see climate action as one of the most important responsibilities and upcoming professions over the next few decades. And I see a lot more people my age being interested in specializing in environmental science or environmental engineering, or even just incorporating sustainability in their everyday lives, regardless of what they want to specialize in.
Well, that's fantastic. So, we are seeing a green ecosystem which is slowly coming in, and interest there. And I think you also made a very important point about how corporates can utilize youth in their welfare and other programs. because they're driven by passion in this particular area. So that's a very important takeaway from here. Istaara, coming to you as the chair of, my God, sounds very big, okay? I've not been a chair of any organization, and I'm, in literally almost 5 decades on Earth so far. So, as a chair of the Environment and Sustainability Council, which countries, in your opinion, have made a significant difference in enforcing innovative sustainability regulations involving youth? And I think you fleetingly mentioned something which caught my ears and interest, is this legal personhood project that you mentioned in your introduction. So can you share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, there's a lot of countries that I think are doing very interesting things. We have this thing with China, who is trying to make sponge cities to tackle urban flooding and stuff. But something that I specifically would want to talk about is the idea of legal personhood. So this is something that we explored in our very first project as a committee. Basically, the informal terms, the whole concept owes its genesis, or like the creation of the term, to an article written by Christopher Stone back in 1971. But basically, what this concept entails is the elements of nature. This could be a river, this could be a forest, being considered an actual person in legal terms. So that means that they could be given the same rights and legal standing that humans do in courts. So that means that they can do things like sue for environmental damage on the sole basis of the harm done to it. And how this is different from before is, or like how this is just different from the status quo, is right now it's very, very difficult for winning cases and actually taking legal action against harmful actors towards the environment, because you need to prove the direct harm to people, which, all right, sure, you might prove that the pollution in the river harmed people living nearby. But then at the same time, the people who are most affected by things like these are people who are very disenfranchised and can't really take up that very, very expensive legal battle. So it's very hard to prove, especially when you weigh it against the benefit of such industrial activities that often do harm the environment. It's very, very difficult to actually make any standing legally. So when you have the idea of legal personhood, you can actually, on the very basis of harm done to it, you say the fact that maybe something like all these chemicals ended up in a river, the fact that happened is something that we can actually fight legally in court. And this is something that has happened and been passed in 2015 in New Zealand for the Wanganui River, because it was based on the Wanganui tribes' native ideology, and because of that, they managed to pass it. Apart from that, we've seen it be included in countries like Bolivia and Ecuador, their constitutions. But I think that there's a lot of sort of room for actually implementing this right now, because it exists mainly as a concept right now.
That's incredible. I mean, I've never heard something like this before, and I'm sure many of the audiences also here. But we've learned something new. I think there is a strong learning for us to adapt such best practices in this side of the world too. And with that, I'm going to move to a question which is now for both of you. And Anant, you take it first. Like what Istaara shared right now, which is like an eye-opener, what are the trends and next practices in youth engagement, particularly in the area of climate action and sustainability, that you see happening, and any global best practice or global steps that you would want to talk about?
Sure. So first, I'd just like to note that it's great to see so many people present at at a sustainability event like today. But the reality is that sustainability is still a blip on the radar for the vast majority of Indians, either because they're not aware of its importance, or they're unsure about how to combat the issues that are arising because of it. The youth, through evolving educational curriculums and social media, have a much higher awareness of sustainability and are much more passionate about driving climate action. So coming to an example of this that I've seen and that I really admire, in Indian society, is this NGO called Project Jatropa, and they work primarily in rural and semi-urban areas to implement sustainable farming practices and renewable energy systems. So it's a completely youth-driven organization working with local volunteers from schools and universities to drive their initiatives. So what I really admire is how they're going beyond activism to action. And improving their communities around them through constructive engagement with existing institutions and individuals. I think we need a lot more of that, and we need to create more opportunities for the youth to be engaged in these kind of direct action programs and directly work with NGOs, companies, and the government to use their interest and their passion for environment and sustainability in a more meaningful way than activism, which definitely has its place, but to go beyond that into advocacy and action.
Great. Istaara, very quickly, your take, and then we wrap up the session. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think that Anant brought up a lot of really good points in terms of social media, how we've been using that, and at the same time, we need to move towards direct action. And I think on the idea of sort of direct action or direct engagement with the youth, I want to talk about the whole idea of youth engagement with policy. And I bring this up because we are, after all, the Youth Policy Collective, and that is primarily what we try to engage with. And this is something that we came across in one of the papers that we were writing, is that the fact that you need youth engagement at every single level of policy making, right? So this includes both with your local municipal council and the mayor of your city, maybe, but then also on a national level. And I think that we're moving towards this in small ways. There's this idea of the youth parliament, which you have in a couple of countries. I'm not sure if it is in India, but there is one in Pakistan. But we think that and there's one in Bangladesh as well. But I think that there's a lot of room to actually fully engage with this and really take the ideas of what matters to the youth, and then also how we think. And obviously, like, there's loads of people putting like really a lot of effort into the policies that come about on a national scale. But when you're directly listening to the youth and they're telling you that this is the issues that matters to us, and of course, climate will be one of those issues. I think that there's a lot of room for good discourse and engagement over there. I also want to talk about.
Sorry, we are overshooting our time. So, Istaara, I'm going to just quickly wrap this up. Let me say that this is there's been a one in lifetime opportunity to sit back and listen to all the amazing things that you guys have been doing and planning for future, which I'm quite sure that also gives a lot of youth direction and new career opportunities to explore, and many of them can take your examples to really work early on in their life for something that they are passionate about. I hope everyone else enjoyed the session as much as I did, and Sarah and Anant, thank you for taking time out for us and participating in this conversation. It was truly very insightful and refreshing. Thank you very much, and good night, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us.